At just 28, CEO Mara Ellison had spent 10 years believing she would never move her legs again. But one rainy night, a single dad delivery driver noticed something everyone else had missed, and that quiet moment began to change both of their lives forever. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where are you watching from. By the time Reed Lawson reached the glass tower on Harbor Avenue, the rain had already soaked through the shoulders of his delivery jacket. It was nearly 9 at night, the hour when downtown Boston stopped pretending to be busy and started showing what was left behind. Empty sidewalks, dim office windows, security guards checking their phones behind polished desks. Reed had one final package in the back of his van, a flat wooden crate marked Ellison Adaptive Design Executive Floor. He almost laughed at the name. His 7-year-old daughter, Ivy, had an adaptive pencil grip for school because of a hand injury from when she was younger. Reed knew enough about adaptive products to know most of them were designed by people who had never needed them. He carried the crate through the lobby, signed in, and took the elevator to the 22nd floor. The office was mostly dark, except for one room at the end of the corridor where warm light spilled through a half-open door. Inside, a young woman sat beside a long conference table, surrounded by sketches, fabric samples, and half-empty coffee cups. Her wheelchair was sleek, custom-built, and expensive. Her expression was not. Mara Ellison was 28 years old, the CEO of Ellison Adaptive Design, and one of the youngest executives Reed had ever delivered to. He recognized her face from business magazines in the lobby downstairs. Calm eyes, sharp suits, a reputation for never missing a deadline. But in person, she looked tired in a way photographs never showed. "Package for Mara Ellison," Reed said gently. She glanced up from a blueprint. "That's me. You can leave it there." He set the crate near the door, gave a polite nod, and turned to leave. Then he heard the soft scrape of rubber against tile. Mara had pushed back from the table, but one wheel caught awkwardly against the leg of a chair. The movement tilted her slightly. She corrected fast, almost too fast, like someone who had learned to hide every difficult moment before anyone could notice. Reed stopped. "Your left wheel isn't locked," he said. Her jaw tightened. "I know." He had heard that tone before. Not from customers, from himself, from the months after his wife died, when every offer of help felt like proof that he was failing at being a father alone. So he kept his voice calm. "I'm not saying you can't handle it, just saying the floor is slick from the rain." Mara looked at him for a second, deciding whether to be offended or practical. Finally, she exhaled. "Fine." Reed crouched beside the chair, careful not to touch more than necessary. He reached for the wheel lock, then noticed the toe of her right shoe shift inside the footrest. It was small. So small he thought at first he had imagined it. Then it happened again. His hand paused. Mara caught the change in his face. "What?" He looked up at her. "Did you move your foot?" The color drained from her expression. "No. I think you did. I haven't moved my legs in 10 years. Reed looked back at the shoe. Then maybe someone should have checked again. For the first time that evening, Mara did not have an answer ready. 10 years earlier, at 18, she had been a passenger in a winter car crash on the way home from college orientation. Her father survived with broken ribs. Mara woke up in a hospital bed, unable to feel anything below her waist. The doctors had used careful words at first. Swelling, trauma, uncertain recovery. Months later, the careful words became permanent ones. She built her life around that verdict because she had no choice. She learned to transfer herself, run meetings, smile through interviews, and make people forget the chair before they noticed the woman in it. By 26, after her father's sudden heart attack, she had taken over his company and turned it from a struggling furniture manufacturer into a respected adaptive design brand. Everyone called her inspiring. No one asked whether she was exhausted from having to be. Reed finished securing the wheel and stood. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line." Mara's eyes remained fixed on her shoe. "You probably imagined it." "Maybe," he said. "But my daughter had nerve damage in her hand when she was little. One doctor said she'd never grip properly. Another noticed one finger twitching and sent us to someone better. That finally made Mara look at him. She writes her own birthday cards now, Reed added. Messy ones, but she's proud of every letter. There was no sales pitch in his voice. No false hope, just a fact he had lived through. Mara leaned back slowly, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her chair. Why are you telling me this? Because sometimes people stop looking once they think they already know the answer. For a moment, only the rain against the windows filled the room. Then Reed picked up his scanner, nodded once, and headed for the door. Mr. Lawson, Mara said before he left. He turned. How did you know my name? It was on the delivery screen. A faint, almost reluctant smile touched her mouth. Right. He smiled back. Good night, Miss Ellison. After he was gone, Mara sat alone in the office for several minutes, staring at the place where her foot had moved. She told herself it was nothing. A muscle spasm, a trick of the light, a stranger trying to be kind. But later that night, when she was back in her apartment and the city hummed below her windows, she slipped off her shoe, watched her bare foot in silence, and whispered, Move. Nothing happened. She almost laughed at herself. Then, just as she reached for the blanket, her smallest toe trembled. Mara stopped breathing. And for the first time in 10 years, the future no longer looked exactly like the past. Mara did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying the movement again and again, until she no longer trusted her own memory. By morning, she had convinced herself it was probably nothing, a reflex, a muscle spasm, something her body had always done, and she had simply stopped noticing. Then, while fastening the strap of her shoe before work, her toes curled again. This time, there was no stranger in the room to blame. No shifting light, no doubt. Her first instinct was not joy. It was fear. Hope had become dangerous to Mara years ago. In the beginning, everyone had offered it to her generously. New therapies, new specialists, new trials. Every appointment had started with a little possibility and ended with another careful disappointment. Eventually, she learned to survive by not reaching for things that might vanish in her hands. But now something had changed inside her body without asking permission. At 10:30 that morning, instead of entering the executive strategy meeting, Mara called her longtime physician, Dr. Nina Patel, and asked for the earliest appointment available. There was a pause on the line. Is everything all right? Mara stared at her right foot beneath the desk. I don't know yet. By late afternoon, she was in an examination room while Dr. Patel tested pressure, reflexes, and response with the same controlled focus Mara used during board negotiations. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Dr. Patel pressed lightly along the arch of Mara's foot, and her toes flexed. The doctor looked up. Mara saw it before she heard it. The surprised Dr. Patel tried to hide. What? Mara asked. Dr. Patel sat back on the stool. I want imaging done. Full review. Your original spinal injury was serious, but not every case remains exactly the same forever. Nerves can behave unpredictably. Scar tissue can change. There are also treatments now that weren't standard when you were 18. Mara almost laughed, but the sound caught painfully in her throat. So after 10 years, someone notices because a delivery driver happened to look down? Dr. Patel did not defend herself. Sometimes medicine gets too comfortable with an old conclusion. The sentence stayed with Mara long after she left the clinic. Over the next week, her life split into two versions. In one, she remained Mara Ellison, CEO leading product reviews, approving budgets, negotiating with investors, smiling through press calls about the company's upcoming mobility line. In the other, she became a patient again, lying inside scanners, answering questions, enduring the old smell of hospital disinfectant that dragged her backward through years she thought she had already survived. She told almost no one, not even her board, especially not her board. Ellison Adaptive Design was preparing for its largest expansion in company history, and one of the investors, Graham Voss, had already been pressing her to step back from daily operations. He dressed concern as strategy, but Mara heard the implication beneath every sentence. She was valuable as a symbol, less so as a decision-maker. If word spread that she was undergoing testing, he would use it. So she kept working, kept smiling, kept the secret folded tightly inside her, and, against her better judgment, she found herself thinking about Reed Lawson more often than she should have. Not because he had noticed the movement, not only because of that, because he had spoken to her without pity. A few days later, his name appeared again on the delivery log for the executive floor. Mara told herself it was coincidence that she remained in the office later than usual that evening. Coincidence that she heard the elevator open before her assistant announced him. Reed stepped in, carrying 2 small parcels, his hair damp from the weather, his expression warm but a little uncertain when he saw her. "Miss Ellison." "Mara is fine." That seemed to catch him off guard. "All right, Mara." The sound of her name in his voice landed more softly than it should have. He placed the boxes on the side table. "How's your daughter's handwriting?" Reed smiled. "Improving. She wrote pancakes on the grocery list yesterday. Left out the second A. But I understood the message." Mara smiled before she could stop herself. "Smart girl." "She is. Also very committed to breakfast." For a brief moment, the office felt less like a command center and more like an ordinary room where 2 people happened to be standing. Then Reed's eyes dropped, not to her chair, but to the folder beside her laptop. A hospital logo showed at the corner before she moved it beneath another file. He looked back at her face. "You got it checked." Mara hesitated. She was used to controlling what people knew about her, but Reed had somehow become tied to the truth from the very first moment. "Yes," she said. "They found signs of preserved nerve pathways, maybe more than anyone realized before." His expression changed, not into triumph, but relief. "That sounds important." "It might be, or it might lead nowhere. Both can be true right now." She studied him. "You say things like you've had practice." He glanced down at the parcel tape in his hand. "My wife died 3 years ago. After that, people kept telling me everything would be okay. I hated it. They meant well, but they were promising something they couldn't know." Mara's face softened. "So now," he continued, "I try not to promise outcomes. I just don't like pretending small changes don't matter." For the first time in days, Mara felt the tightness in her chest loosen. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the desk. The message was from Dr. Patel. "Need to discuss your scans in person. Soon." Mara's stomach dropped. Reed noticed the shift in her expression. "Bad news?" "I don't know." And that was the part that frightened her most. Because after 10 years of certainty, uncertainty had finally returned. And with it came the possibility that everything she had built to protect herself might soon be tested. Dr. Patel did not begin with a miracle. She began with a scan on the screen and a long explanation Mara had to force herself to hear slowly. The original injury had never been as clean or final as everyone believed. There had been damage, yes, but also severe inflammation and scar tissue around several nerve pathways. Over time, some of that pressure had changed. Newer testing showed faint but real signals traveling where no one had expected them to remain. "There is no guarantee," Dr. Patel said carefully, "but there is enough activity to justify a full rehabilitation review. Possibly nerve stimulation, possibly more." Mara stared at the image, fingers curled around the edge of the chair. "So, I spent 10 years believing there was nothing to try." Dr. Patel's eyes lowered for a moment. "You spent 10 years living with the information you were given." That answer did not erase the grief. It did, however, give Mara somewhere to place it. For the next 2 days, she moved through work with a strange clarity. Graham Voss requested another private meeting, expecting the same controlled CEO he had been quietly trying to sideline for months. Instead, Mara came prepared. She told the board she would be entering an intensive rehabilitation program. She also presented a transition plan, named her operations director as temporary acting lead, and proposed an independent clinical advisory panel for every future product launch. Graham frowned. "This expansion needs stability." It needs honesty, Mara replied. We build for people whose bodies are discussed in rooms they are rarely invited into. That changes now. No one clapped. No one gasped. But by the end of the meeting, the board approved her plan. For the first time, Mara did not feel powerful because she had hidden every weakness. She felt powerful because she had stopped treating truth like one. Rehabilitation was harder than any negotiation she had ever led. There were mornings when her legs refused to respond at all, afternoons when one tiny movement cost more effort than an entire day of work, and evenings when she returned home too exhausted to speak. Progress came in inches, a slight lift of the foot, a stronger response at the knee, 10 seconds standing between parallel bars with braces and 2 therapists beside her. She hated how much she wanted every small gain. She hated even more how much she needed people while making them. Reed never tried to become the center of it. He simply kept showing up in quiet ways, sometimes with coffee after a late session, sometimes with a ridiculous drawing from Ivy taped to the cup sleeve. Once, when Mara admitted she was angry that no one had looked harder years ago, he sat beside her outside the rehab center and said, "You're allowed to grieve the time you lost without letting it steal what's in front of you now." That was the day she reached for his hand first. Their relationship did not begin with a grand confession. It grew through ordinary things. Phone calls after Ivy fell asleep, lunches between Mara's appointments, Reed teasing her for answering emails during movies, Mara helping Ivy build a cardboard city for school and taking the assignment far too seriously. Months passed. Ellison Adaptive Design changed with Mara. The company began bringing wheelchair users, prosthetic users, parents, therapists, and disabled designers into early product development instead of asking for opinions at the end. Their next campaign did not feature Mara as a symbol of overcoming anything. It featured real customers explaining what good design meant in daily life. And Mara, slowly, changed too. She still used her wheelchair. She still needed it. But one crisp autumn afternoon, with braces locked around her legs and Reed standing nearby without touching her, she rose from her chair in the therapy gym and held herself upright for 12 full seconds. Her breath shook. Reed's eyes filled before hers did. "I'm standing," she whispered. "You are," he said, just as softly. It was not the ending people imagined when they heard stories like hers. She did not walk out of the building cured. She did not leave her chair behind. But she left that day with something she had not carried in years, not false hope, not denial, but a future that was open again. That evening, Mara joined Reed and Ivy at a small diner near the river. Ivy talked through an entire stack of pancakes, explaining that her teacher said her handwriting had become very readable, which she considered a major professional achievement. Mara laughed, and Reed watched her the way people watch something they never expected to find, but are grateful they did. Outside, the city lights trembled across the water. Mara reached for Reed's hand beneath the table, and this time, she did not hesitate. 10 years earlier, life had narrowed around her in a single moment. Now, because one tired delivery driver had noticed what everyone else had stopped looking for, it had begun to widen again. Not all at once, but enough to let love, work, and possibility come back in.